Jocko Collins, who was a great scout for many years, 43 years, said a baseball man is a guy who after a while there's no distinction between him and the game. There's no place where baseball leaves off and he begins. Maybe he only played the game at the semi-pro level, or maybe he played in the minor leagues. But when that career was over, he still wanted to hang around ball diamonds.
I just always believed and thought I was going to play in the major leagues one day, and then, you know, when it doesn't happen, it's, I tell you, it's a devastating thing to deal with, and it literally takes you years and years to get over it. I think, you know, I think at 47 years old, I've probably come to the stunning conclusion that I'm not going to play in the major leagues.
And again, not to relive glories of the past, but to really look at talent and appreciate it, and I guess almost like a racetrack tout, give his take on what the talent is and where it might go.
All scouts have a mutual respect with each other and realize that we're trying to beat the daylights out of each other.
I used to think I loved baseball, but that was before I started hanging around with scouts. They really love baseball.
They have their own subculture, they have their own language, but the interesting thing about the young scouts that go out that still look very athletic and haven't been out of the game that long, they have the same language. They're looking for the same things as the guys that have been around the game for 40 years.
There are probably 500, maybe more than that now, who do this for a living full time. I go to ball games with scouts and find that in the fifth inning, they didn't know what the score was and didn't care. They're looking at one or two ball players on the field, and they're kind of looking in the same way if you went to a play with a casting director. They might be indifferent to the scenery or even the plot, but they're looking at talent, and they're trying to guess how good that talent is and is going to become.
He's a kid that we may never even end up signing. And I've made this very clear to the coach and to him that, you know, it's probably a 1 in 10 chance that we're going to sign him. If we've got a need that we feel that he can meet, then we may be interested. And depending on Jerry's analysis of him today, I may be overrating him somewhat. And again, I told him I was going to bring my boss in to see him, and a lot was riding on that.
Yeah, put the pressure on me.
You better believe it. That's the way I like to do it. Pass the buck. I'm real good at that.
His hands are okay, and his arm is average major league arm, I would call it. His feet are not really shortstop feet, and his running speed is below average major league. And with the bat, with the short look, it's hard to tell, but watching batting practice, looks like he's got some raw power. But overall, for me, when you break him down and judge tool by tool and grade all things out, he comes out, for me, to a guy that would not make it to the major leagues. When you're 1,500 miles from Houston and you've just driven 400 miles and you get there and the player decided he's not going to play that day for one reason or another, so you go to your backup game, which is maybe another 200 miles away, and that guy has a pulled hamstring and he's the DH, and you know you're focusing on that, and you're you know, the World Series in Houston seems a long way away.
Everybody today is looking for a 19-year-old guy with 20 years experience. He quit making them.
You do find people in their 70s and 80s who, if they can take the travel and if their eyesight is still good, often are better than they were half a life ago.
Every time you write up a kid, you're putting your job on the line. If you say he can play and he don't get to the big league, you done made a mistake. And if you say he can't play and he winds up in the big league, you've made another one.
Now, there aren't many 80-year-olds who can still take that travel. Hugh Alexander has cut back now where he's only scouting in the state of Florida. But this time last year, he was crisscrossing the continent on behalf of the Chicago Cubs.
In 1935, I played a ball game. I was only 17 years old for the Seminole Redbirds, which was we had a good semi-pro team, real good, and I was a center fielder. And in a doubleheader on the 4th of July, I hit 4 home runs that day against the Tulsa, Oklahoma club, which was supposed to be the best club in Oklahoma semi-pro. And then later on, I found out that the manager and the sponsor, a fellow named Larkin, was a part of our associate scout for Cy Slapnecker, who was the general manager of the Cleveland Ball Club. And in about a week, I was playing a ball game over at Shawnee so I could make a little money, go over and play for $20. And I hit 2 home runs and 2 doubles, won the ball game in the bottom of the ninth. And here comes Slapnecker. He had come all the way from Cleveland to see that ball game, you know, to take a look at me. And I signed with him the next day. I go to Springfield. I played 80 games at Springfield, and I hit .344. I hit 31 home runs in 80 ball games, and drove in 102 or 3 runs. And here I go to Cleveland.
Or that winter, he was working in an oil field in Oklahoma. He got his hand caught in the big gears of a water well pump.
And somebody had broke the guard that covered those 2 gears. There was no guard over there. The guard was laying on the ground. So, but I knew it, and I had started it, but I knew to be careful because it had open gears. So I was crank, and pretty soon it spit and sputtered and started. And I reached for the throttle, and the throttle was directly over those gears, and it caught the bottom part of that sleeve. And here's my hand started, and I'm trying to break the sleeve out of or tear the sleeve out of the shirt, right? I'm trying to do everything, and I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just gonna eat me up alive, because you can't tear khaki, right? You might cut it with a knife or a pair of scissors, but you're not gonna tear it up, right? Unless it's old and just rotten. But and it dragged my hand right down through those gears. Well, they had to go like that much here, and finally it came out at the bottom, and it was all stringy and just chewed up. And I picked it up, and I don't know exactly what the hell to do. So there was a little tool house, kind of like a little restroom, and I ran in there and I got a screwdriver and I got a piece of cloth, and I put a tourniquet on my arm, you know, by just getting around to put that screwdriver in there, tighten it up. It wasn't bleeding that bad. Now I walked to a house. I'd say it was pretty close to a quarter of a mile, maybe. But I knew the house was there. And I walked over there and hollered, and a woman came to the back door. And she said, "What the hell do you want?" I said, "Lady," I said, "I'm in trouble," or whatever words I said. I've got some bad news here. I just cut my hand off. Can you give me something to wrap it up? Well, she gets all excited, and then she saw my hand, and she brought a pillowcase out, and she helped me wrap it up. And I said, I got to keep the tourniquet on there because it might bleed to death, because I have to get to town. I'm 14 miles from town, out in the woods. And I said, "Have you got a car?" She said, "No." And if I had one, I couldn't. I don't know how to drive. She said, "But there's a pickup down at that well underneath the hill here, and I don't know who, it belongs to the oil company, but I don't know who's driving it." I said, "Well, I don't care who's driving it. If it's got a key in it, I'm going to drive it." So I walked down to the pickup and got in it, and sure enough, the keys were right in it. I started, and I drove 14 miles to town. And I walked in his office and hollered at Dr. Chambers. Dr. Chambers, he said, "I'll be with you in a minute. I got a patient." I said, "Hey, this is Hugh Alexander, and I need you right now because I just cut my hand off." Well, here he comes. And he said, "Oh my God." So he got rid of his patient. And we went in his office, and he looked at it. In the meantime, they had sent word to my dad. And he hadn't got there yet. But anyway, Dr. Chambers said, "I can't help you on it here." He said, it's just too bad. It's just ground up like, some of it like hamburger. You know, it's broken. It just smashed all the bones up and everything. He said, "I can't get you to Oklahoma City because that's 54 miles. You'll die before you get there." So he said, "What we're going to have to cut it off right here." I said, "Well, let's cut it off." He said, "I got some bad news for you." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I don't have any anesthetic. I don't have any." "Oh," I said, "Doctor." He said, "I don't have any anesthetic." And he said, "By the time we try to go borrow some from maybe another doctor or get some, you might be dead by then." So he said, "The best thing we could possibly do, I can give you as much morphine as I can give you without killing you, and give you 3 or 4 shots of whiskey, and we can cut it off right here in the office, and it's going to hurt like hell." I said, "It's not going to hurt any worse. It's hurting right now. Let's go."
So there he was at the age of 20 with no other skills than baseball skills. And he said, I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. I had a life to live and a living to earn. So that within 2 months of leaving the hospital, he went to spring training to learn how to be a baseball scout.
When I left New Orleans in spring training that spring with Slapnicka, one of the last questions I asked him, I said, now, Mr. Slap, when I get home, I'm going to go home. I wasn't married at that time. I'm going to go home, and now where do you want me to start? He said, I want you to go in South Texas because you'll be in the warm climate. Go almost to the Mexican border, and just every town you go into, get a hold of the sports writer or get you a newspaper and see if there's any kind of high school or college or semi-pro baseball being played in that area. And if there isn't, go to the newspaper if they have one and find out who writes high school and college sports, which I followed all his direction. And he said, then start yourself north. Start north and go to Oklahoma when the weather gets a little better, and then go to Kansas and Nebraska and North and South Dakota and Iowa and Minnesota and just Missouri, and just go all the way to Canada and all the way back to Texas, and you'll be gone all year, but you'll be traveling. And you get 5 cents a mile, and you get $2 a day meal money. The old scouts took me in hand, about 5 or 6 of them. They took me in hand and they taught me how to drink, for Christ's sake. I never took a drink of whiskey in my life till I met them damned old scouts years ago. And they liked me, and I guess they felt sorry for me, and they're really going to help me, and they did. God damn, they'd get to drinking in the room and talking and for my benefit.
Hard drivers, hard drinkers. You have to figure that a typical scout in those days might be putting 75,000 miles by flivver across the continent, or at least in a pretty big area of the continent. I've talked to guys who basically had as their territory the South or the Southwest. So just imagine that. I mean, obviously, in order to do the job, you'd have to have a network of local contacts to help you out. But you'd have to plan your schedule very intelligently. They had vast authority, confidence of ownership, and very self-motivated people, driven, I would say, as well as driving.
Since toward the end of January up until the June draft, I'm in over 100 different cities in like 120 days in 22 states in Puerto Rico, and drive probably 7,000 miles a month during that period, and probably fly more miles than I drive, and I'm responsible, probably see 5,000 ball players during that period of time, and there may only be 100 or 150 that I write up as prospects as full-length reports. I've got the yellow line all over the place.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh no, now I gotta make an escape. No wonder she was yelling. This has to be freshly painted. I don't see any paint coming out of there.
Well, no, it's a truck's way ahead of her. It's a
The other truck's painting? Oh no.
This is a first.
Maybe I better drop back so she doesn't get my license plate. C-A-N-A-N D-A-I G-U-A. And this is, what's the date today? 5th? And he's 6'3", 170?
6'3", 170. It should be. I mean, this kid's an untapped gem. I mean, it's.
I know. For me, this guy may.
He's just scratching the surface. I mean,
Yeah.
just think, he's only pitched 1 year in high school and 1 year in college. That's it.
The backbone of any organization is the area scouts. It's not the scouting director. It's not the national guy, and it's not the regional guys.
And then you ask the coach to list anybody who he thinks might be a prospect. And the only trouble with that, he'll list his sister's boy or his cousin or somebody, and you get there, he weighs 110 pounds, he can't pick up a bat. And if he only listed 1 or 2, you felt pretty good. But if he lists 10, you know they can't play. There ain't that many nowhere.
Typically, a scout who was trusted and respected could call in the front office and say, I found a kid, he can play. And maybe give the kid $1,000 bonus, probably before World War II, would have been considered generous. But you didn't have cross-checkers, you didn't have second-guessers, you really didn't have forms to fill out.
I said, you Joe Gore? And he said, yeah. I said, Hugh Alexander Seminole. He said, oh, I remember you. He said, you're the guy that got his hand cut off. You're a baseball scout. I said, that's me. So he said, let's have a beer. So we had a couple of beers. After a while, and in this little time element of an hour or so, I said, boy, I'm really talking to a crook. I got him paid. Boy, I'm really talking to a guy in the fast lane. You know, because he had everything all mapped out, but he's just a little bartender in a country beer joint. Pretty soon here it come. He said, I know where there's a good player. I said, you do? And he said, I sure do. I said, well, let me have it. He said, how much can I get out of it? I said, well, I'll take care of you if he can play, and I sign him, I'll take care of you. He said, to the tune of how much? So we argued around it a bit, didn't argue, but talked about it. Finally, I said, give you $75. If I see him, you tell me his name, and if I sign him in the next year or two, you get $75. He said, you got it. He said his name is Dale Mitchell. You remember him, don't you? 10 years left fielder for Cleveland, and then he went in '56. He went to the Dodgers and played in the World Series, and was the last out in Larson's perfect game.
Before the draft, if you found a guy, say here in Valdosta, you didn't tell nobody anything about it. And you could isolate him, and then when the draft time, I mean, the time to come to sign him the first week of June, you could go get him. You wouldn't have any opposition.
I literally passed out at the wheel. I was that sick. And when I came to, I felt myself go, and I'm trying to shake myself because I knew I was passing out. And when I came to, I was going about 40 miles an hour, and two of the tires were off the road, and I was close to hitting a guardrail, but I managed to get it back on the road. So anyway, I stopped, and this highway patrolman stopped. He said, what's the problem? I said, I'm really sick. Where's the nearest hospital? They got IVs in me and everything, and I'm telling the doctor, hey, I got to go to the game this afternoon, so you got to get me out of here. All I could think of was getting to that game, and that's the desire that scouts have. It's just so much fun. There's so much anticipation. This might be the guy today, and we actually get a little crazy about it, I guess, at times. And I did talk him into letting me go, and I drove a half hour down the road, made it to a hotel was the only thing I made it to, and I slept 23 and a half hours before I woke up. Anybody home? Stop that. I love you. Dude, stop it. Bye.
Thank you. Hey, it's about time.
Hi, sweetie.
Missed you.
Yes, come on. You can make it. Come on, baby.
How old is he?
13.
13, gosh.
They usually live to about 7 or 8. Well, he can't run. He can't run too well anymore. His arm's just fair, but he's a cutie. Yeah. It didn't look like he was going to make it through the winter, and I knew I couldn't take time out during the scouting season, so I'm afraid he don't want to listen, but I already dug his grave. It's up there. But he doesn't want any part of it, so he's hanging in there.
To take a wiffle ball and coat it with layer after layer of adhesive tape till
it became very hard. Yes.
It had a funny feeling to it, but then he would put me over to the side and I would soft toss it, and in the garage he would whale that wiffle ball
into mattresses. We had mattresses set up in the garage.
Right.
Right.
So one day I'm off to the side there tossing the coated wiffle ball, and all of a sudden he just smacked that thing right in my nose. I thought things went black, but
came off the end of the bat and just, I mean, you know, she's only like 4 or 5 feet away, so I mean, it comes off the bat about 100 miles an hour. smacked her right square in the mouth. Her lip just was like out like this. 8 different trips to the West Coast with practically no money. The way I survived out there was playing poker all night at the casinos. I'd go play poker all night at the casinos and then sleep during the morning and the daytime and play baseball in the evening. And I finally signed with the Baltimore Orioles in 1974 out there in California. I ended up breaking his leg one time, and when was that? I think it was when I was in pro ball. He was throwing to me in the batting cage, and I hit a line drive back at him, and it broke his leg. He went down, he got right back up and kept pitching. How long did you work in Associate Scout? About 8 or 10 years. 8 or 10 years, yeah.
So did you learn anything from your son?
Yeah, I did.
He knows more about it than I do.
Well, what he had already taught me, I taught it back to him.
I've gone to tryout camps where young kids come out of the woodwork just to say they were at a tryout camp. And you'll see players there that can't run, they can't throw, they can't hit. And somebody like me sitting on the sidelines might be tempted to crack jokes about it. But I find that scouts are genial, tolerant, and I think they understand what dreams are because they have them too.
My dad, who had outstanding judgment as a scout and all of the qualities you want in a scout, except for one, and that was he couldn't stand to tell a player that he was released, that he wasn't good enough to play in the big leagues. So, guess who took it upon themselves to release these major league hopefuls? My dear wife, who is not afflicted with a soft heart.
How did you let them down? What was your style?
Get out of here, you're gone.
You're out of here.
Well, I actually was afraid they were going to do their arm damage because he told them what they were throwing on the gun and that wasn't quite good enough to make the cut. And there's a tendency of hopefuls. They know the next pitch will be the one that is hard enough, and so they just kept throwing and throwing, wondering what they were throwing and sure that the next one would be better. And finally, I said, I think that's enough. Dad didn't want to say that's enough.
Who is it this year? My mom always buys me one of these Harlequin.
The bat is loose.
Harlequin. Looks like Harmon Killebrew, maybe?
Thank you, guys.
Yep. All right, Harmon. I met Harmon one time, in fact.
Did you?
Down in Boise, yeah. All right. Beautiful, thank you, Ma.
You're welcome. Happy birthday.
And then 1978, she quit her teaching job because we thought it was really going to work out when we were part owner of a minor league team in Boise, and then we managed to go out there and lose every penny we had. And then we came back and she didn't have her teacher's job. So now that's when we were really scraping. I worked at a race dog track as a cellar supervisor, and then I worked at a group home for problem boys for about 1.5 years. And then Ray Poitevin, the guy that had signed me originally, was now the scouting director with the Milwaukee Brewers and farm director. And he called me and offered me the job to scout. And I got lucky in the first, 5 or 6 years, I had like 6 guys in the big leagues. It was like, I think it was 1989 or 90 when I took that position. I said, well, what it basically means is toward the end of the 90s, if the Astros aren't winning, I'm in trouble. So you're evaluated, by the people higher up. They want you to produce, and they expect you to produce, and you better produce, or you're not going to have a job for all that long.
Desi Rutherford, a good ball game defensively, and had a sacrifice fly. But in the Phillies, a go-ahead run, and Mark Parrott, good job behind the plate. So the Bills win by a score of 5-3, all of Houston's 18 winning streak. And hopefully starting a streak of their own here in this homestand. 5-3 final of the bet. We'll be back with more right after these messages.
Pennsylvania has always been a big construction state.
Is that its motto? Pennsylvania, the construction state?
That's my motto for it.
Detours is the worst thing about scouting. You get on a detour somewhere. And then you run up a lot of mileage, you get 29 cents a mile. You hit one of them detours, you have to make a note in there. This mileage might not look right, but it's on account of the usual Georgia detours too.
It's a very tough business to get into just by writing resumes or trying to get interviews and so forth. The school I founded for guys who wanted to become scouts in the late 80s, we had about 100 graduates, and there's a few of those guys still that would be excellent full-time scouts who don't have jobs.
What happened at the time was my father was very ill. We now know that it would have been called hepatitis C, but at that time they didn't know what it was. So he had terminal illness, and the Sunday that I had to leave, I had my last conversation with my father, and there was no doubt in his mind that I was still going to school. I was not going to stay with him and be by his bedside. So Wednesday night, my first week to school, I got a call from my wife and my father had passed away. And it just made me more determined to learn whatever I could and do a better job at the game of baseball, because he was the one that was responsible for starting that passion that I have now.
And what's this sinker he throws you're telling me about? Is it just a change sinker, or is it off his fastball, or what? Have you heard how much he has gained in velocity in the past year from any reliable sources? You know, you're looking at movement, you're looking at second pitch, you're looking at poise, you're looking at aggressiveness. But you can teach movement and you can develop control. Whereas velocity, you either have it or you don't have it. If I come in to see a pitcher that one of my scouts has recommended, I study that pitcher every single second that I'm there. When he gets off the bus, if he's talking to a friend, if you know, you watch him very carefully when the guy hits a home run off of him. You watch him when one of his players makes an error. How is he going to react to that? You know, so you can determine exactly how selfish he may be, or how aggressive he may be. You get to know his very nature.
It was when I'd run into Branch Rickey Sr. I remember one thing he told me. I would run into him in Pueblo, Colorado, watching a ball game, and he invited me to come up and sit with him. And one of the things he said to me, he said, "Young fella, I understand that you're going to be a real good baseball scout. You're a good worker, so on and so forth." I said, "Well, I hope so." He said, "Let me give you one little piece of advice." I said, "Okay." He said, "When you run into a ball player and you can't make up your mind fully of whether he's a prospect or not," he said, "walk away and leave him." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Just walk away, because it's a mistake." He said, "Your first observation of a ball player is the right one."
If you can't make a decision, you can't do this job. And you got to be willing to accept accountability that you made a wrong decision, because you're going to be wrong 93% of the time. And you know, you can consider that because about 7% play in the big leagues, and if they don't make it in the big leagues, you made a bad decision.
You watch this game, and there's certain guys that you've recommended highly, and there's guys on other clubs that you've recommended poorly, and you know, anytime you watch a game, you're just, you know, you're feeling a lot of tension usually. Come on, Billy. Come inside with the fastball, bud. Yes.
In the late 40s, the Dodgers, under Branch Rickey, before O'Malley took it over, had 29 farm clubs. 29 farm clubs. The next year they had 26. Well, when I went over there in the early 50s, I knew with that many farm clubs, I couldn't lose. There was no way I could lose, because I had more experience than other scouts. And I said, "God damn, I can go over there and I can sign 15 or 20 ball players where I can't sign any with the White Sox. Or if I go with some other ball club that doesn't have any money or won't spend it, then I'm peeing right up a rope, so to speak." So I said, I'll just go on that Brooklyn deal, and I did. And they let me sign 10, 12, 15, 20 ball players a year, And the result was I ended up with about 55 or 56 ball players in the big leagues.
There were about 5 ball clubs as late as the early 50s who had black players, and that's all there were. And some of the scouts who scouted for those teams were called ebony hunters. And it was a term of denigration by other scouts who made fun of them or who would try to persuade white kids not to sign with the Dodgers. I think that happened often in the South, where the Dodgers were viewed as a black team.
The Red Sox scout says that you better be careful if you sign with the Dodgers, because they might make your boys sleep with them niggers. That wouldn't do good. So I'm almost beat right there. But I said, can I come back in the morning sometime about 10 o'clock before you sign? I got something else I want to talk to you about. Oh, yeah, sure, Mr. Alexander. I'm going to run second in this deal now. But I get back to the hotel, and I called Fresco Thompson in Brooklyn. He was the farm system and director and the scouting director. He was all of it. And I told him, I said, Fresco, didn't you tell me last winter that the Red Sox offered $200,000 for Charlie Neal? Remember Charlie Neal, the second baseman? He said, they certainly did, Huey. I said, well, I got a little problem here. I told him, he said, well, you don't have a problem anymore. But give me the name of the boy, his parents, and the address, and I'm going to send him a telegram right now. Right now I'm going to send him a telegram and tell him that the Red Sox scout told him a lie because the Red Sox offered us $200,000 for Charlie Neal. And I got the player.
Queens Midtown Tunnel and the 59th Street Bridge, not too bad. Inbound Lincoln is down to about 5 or 10. Minor delays now at the Holland and also the George Washington Bridge. Tappan Zee Bridge moving nicely into Westchester and Rockland counties. And now the forecast from the WCBS Weather Center.
Well, we're going to go over and see a high school pitcher in Long Island, New York. As of about midnight last night, he was pitching, and then as of about 9 o'clock this morning, I got the message from Bob Blair that he wasn't pitching. So somewhere in the night something happened, but that's not unusual. So instead, we're headed over to Philadelphia. Well, the Philadelphia area, it's actually in New Jersey, to see a third baseman named Kevin Kelly, another high school player. Coach, you know which guy on that team's Kelly, by chance?
Yeah.
That's I figured. Thanks.
I think that when somebody says to me, this kid looks like a ball player, or he's got the mannerisms, or even that famous phrase, the good face, what they mean is, I've been hanging around ball diamonds for decades, and I have a sense of the tools that it takes to succeed professionally, and particularly in looking at swings or pitching motions. And so we may call it intuition, but maybe what he's doing is surveying the data bank, memory of all the previous players he's seen. Let me tell you something really interesting. I talked to a scout in 1981 who was looking at a shortstop in Louisiana. But he said, this guy reminds me of Mike Schmidt. Now he says, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Mike Schmidt. I'm saying that he's got the kind of body build and tools that you could project. He's has that kind of strength and coordination. Now, I looked at Mike Schmidt's scouting report that had been written in about 1970 or 71. And the scout who wrote it said, this guy reminds me of Jim Fregosi. Jim Fregosi was a great shortstop third baseman, in the 60s. I bet you if you could go back and get a scouting report on Jim Fregosi, you'd find somebody who said, this guy reminds me of Al Rosen.
You need to be able to recognize things. There's all kinds of opportunities out there when you watch a kid play. You might find another player. You might be able to find a follow for next year. It's multifaceted. But if you don't have the instincts for it, you're not going to recognize it.
Baseball scouts, I think, more often than not, are looking at ball players who, if they make the majors, are going to be playing a different position than they were when the scouts saw them. Mike Schmidt at Ohio U was a shortstop. Bob Boone, who was a catcher, I think was a third baseman when people saw him. Bill Russell, the shortstop, was a center fielder. And Cal Ripken, I talked to a scout who missed out on him completely because he was a pitcher when he was in high school.
Nobody wanted Don Sutton. Nobody in baseball wanted him except me. Even when I called the Dodgers and told him I had found a ball player in Pensacola, Florida, that I wanted to sign, named Don Sutton. And Al Campanis was the scouting director at that particular time. And he said, let me look to see if we got anything on him, Huey. He come back and he said, oh no. He said, our scouts got him NP, no prospect. And I said, and I don't want to cuss here. He said, I don't care what anybody's got him. I want this ball player because he's got the best curve I've seen in a long, long time. And I can sign him for $18,000 bonus. Al Campanis said, no. I said, it's not right, Al. I said, God damn it. Anyway, so I hang up, and in a few minutes I called Buzzy Bavasi, the general manager, who I knew real well. And I told him the story on the phone of what predicament I'm in. He said, well, let me talk to Al and I'll call you back for you. And I told him. He comes back in a few minutes. He said, well, Al said, okay. And he said, I'm going to go along with you. He said, you just don't make mistakes on players. You don't make mistakes. He said, I'm going to let you sign that ball player. Well, he won 323 games in the big league.
I started off Rod Carew. I started off some Hall of Fame people. We signed him when I was with Minnesota and took him down in Florida. I had him from the first day. And you could see that he was going to be a great hitter, but he couldn't hit up a ball in a ditch out at second base. We worked with him till he finally got passable in the big league, but then we had to move him to first base. He couldn't make a double play with a pencil.
We've all got skeletons in our closet. There's always a few out there that you just don't ever know what's in a guy's heart. I mean, we can see the guy with what we think is all the ability in the world, and I hate to use the phrase, but he's a can't-miss guy, and he doesn't make it. And you get the guy that just, he's going to make it. He's going to fight himself. You don't know what's in their heart. And, you know, if we knew that, we wouldn't make near as many mistakes.
Paul O'Neill was a guy that I didn't really care much for, and I went back to see him as a position player. He had some tools. He could throw, he could run. I saw him strike out 4 times in one game and acted like he didn't want to play, and I didn't even put him on my draft list, and the Reds took him in the 5th round. He's turned out to be a pretty good big league player.
So I went to Commerce, Oklahoma. I went in to see the principal and was talking to him about Mickey Mantle. He said, yeah, we have a Mickey Mantle going to school there, but he said, we don't play high school baseball. Well, I said, you don't? He said, no. And he said, you might not be interested in him because he's got osteomyelitis of the leg. I said, he has. He said, he sure has. He said, he got hurt in football and so on and so forth. I said, okay. I went out and got in my car, and as I drove away, I probably said to myself, well, that's the end of that deal because I'm not going to pursue that any further. Well, Jerome Holtzman, you know, the great writer for the Chicago paper, he's a hell of a friend of mine. And he's used it a half a dozen times about the Hugh Alexander and Mickey Mantle story. And he said when Huey got in the car, he wadded up the little piece of paper he had Mickey Mantle's name on, threw it out the window, and it just fluttered down the street, Mickey Mantle.
Players think you're just watching while the action's going on, but you're really watching, you know, every single thing they do. If they're talking to friends, you try to get within earshot.
An infield might be the most important thing a position player does that day. So they've got to come out and show whatever they've got during infield, because that might be the only chance a scout gets to see a ball hit to him.
Scout comes in to see your tools and you're 3 for 4, it doesn't mean you're drafted. If you're 0 for 4, it doesn't mean you're not drafted.
One of Branch Rickey's favorite phrases was putting the $ on the muscle. His advice to all of his scouts was at some point after assessing the tools, you have to come out and say to your scouting director, here's how much of the company's money I would be willing to risk to acquire this ball player. Or here's how good this ball player is in relation to the other players I've been looking at this spring. And he called that putting the $ on the muscle. And I found, surprisingly, that some ball clubs in their scouting manuals or in their instructions to scouts still use that. So that you'll find that in addition to the number grades they'll have for arm strength or power or whatever, they'll have a box inviting a scout to use a dollar amount as a code to indicate the relative value of this player.
They're brutal. Look. Come on, do it right. That's the worst bat race I've ever seen. When I come to a ball game, professional game, I like to enjoy myself. And 9 out of 10 times, I chow down some cotton candy, man. That's part of it. A right-handed hitting outfielder without an exceptional either power or running speed, if you take between 1950 and 1980, you can count those guys on one hand. And but you know, there was an exception like Manny Mota, for instance. But You know, so a scout, when he looks at a young right-handed hitting outfielder, and if he doesn't have great raw power or great running speed, if you're going to sign that guy, you're really playing against the odds, just like in a poker game. You don't draw to an inside straight. Even if you're at home watching a game on television, if you don't have a stopwatch in your hand, you happen to have the remote control in your hand, you find yourself hitting the remote control when the batter swings. And the average major league runner for a right-handed hitter running time would be 4.3 seconds to first base. And for an average left-handed hitter, it would be 4.2 seconds to first base. Well, the first round bonus these days, you know, is $1 million, $2 million. A second round bonus would be more like in the $300,000 or $400,000 range. If a particular player has second round ability and he's a 4-2 runner to first base, probably if he was a 4-1 runner to first base, he'd be a first round player.
He was the head scout for Pittsburgh at the time, Rex Bowen. He was there, and everybody had a stopwatch clocking these guys. And I asked him, he's my friend, I said, why ain't you got one of them? He said, hey, you don't need the goddamn thing. I said, them son of bitches don't know what they're looking at. He says, watch this. Guy running over, he said, 4-2. He said, what'd he do it in? Oh, 4-2. He told him what he was running in, and he didn't have no watch. He'd call every one of them. And I said to myself, by God, if Rex can do it, I can do it. And they had them damn guns. I said, if I can't look at it and tell how hard that son of a bitch is throwing, I'm in the wrong line of work. What difference does it make how hard he's throwing if he can't throw it over the plate, he can't pitch a lick? It don't make no difference. How good, if he can't do nothing but run, why are you clocking him? It's out of curiosity. It looks good on paper. They'll send a report in, all that. It looks good on the report. They don't know whether that guy can scout or not. The thing about it, they want to know if the guy can play ball.
If the fastball's straight, it's going to get hit just as hard at 92 as it will at 88. Guy that throws under 88, you're going to see it. You don't need a gun to tell you that. And the guy that throws over 92, 93, you can see it. People don't pay attention to whether a guy can pitch, whether he has a feel for pitching, has a feel for a breaking ball. You know, you're more concerned about the gun reading. You know, if this guy's going to go out and throw 92, 93, but he doesn't have command, he can't, he walks people, what good does it do? I mean, the road to the big leagues is littered with a lot of guys that threw 92, 93, 95 that never got out of A-ball.
There was a time, up to 1965, when signing a player meant selling yourself and your team to that player and his family. Now, signing a player means being smart enough to acquire the player's draft rights when your turn comes around.
You see a guy you like to get him, well, you know, you got to get 2 or 3 other people in here in your organization that got to like him and agree with you, and then you've got a chance of 1 in 30 per round of getting the guy.
I was only in the draft like 2 years, and the second year I was there working for the Dodgers. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and I've got 9 good players. I'm talking about 9 good ones, and about 7 of them went to the big leagues. And I'm really nervous, and I'm talking to Cam Pennis. I said, Al, if you don't take one of those 9 players, I said, they're all big league, real good big league prospects. You know, like Bert Hooton and some of those guys. They were good prospects. And if you don't take one of them at the end of the first round, I can go on home because I won't have any players left. That means I worked my ass off all spring long, day and night, for 3 or 4 months, for nothing. For nothing. He said, well, yeah, that could happen. Well, the next day, here's the draft. All 9 players went in the first round. We didn't get a player.
We only go see rounds 1 and 2. And combined, Bill Kelso's my national guy. We combined will see all the 3rd round guys or most of them. The regional guys like Gerry, he does rounds 1 through 6, and he just usually gets to sees each guy once. From the 7th round on, we don't see these guys. Those are the area guys' drafts. That's their reward for a tough job.
A lot of times this gets into the politics of drafting. You may have a guy who has trouble getting his front office to trust the reports he's sending in. A cross-checker may see that player for 1 game and have to make an assessment that could be radically wrong.
There are no secrets anymore. I think all the scouts talk amongst each other, so they all know about everybody. And that doesn't mean they all like the same players.
But once the wave starts, if one scout tells another scout and he tells another scout and so forth, or if a coach tells a scout, well, there were 3 scouts in there today, once that wave starts, it diminishes your chances of getting that player maybe in what round you think you should get him in, say the 5th round.
I said, keep your mouth shut. Just keep it. They can't do it. They ain't nowhere they keep it shut. They have to try to get some information from you to be sure they're not wrong on the player that you're looking at. You follow me? So they need that help, right? Or they're just being a smart aleck. So I used to just stay away from them. I'd visit with them, and if they want to go in the bar and have a drink, fine and dandy. But I'd tell them a lot of time, okay, let's go in my room. I got a couple bottles of whiskey. We'll go in and have some drinks, then we'll go eat. But no talking about players. If we're going to talk about players, I don't want any part of it. Well, now, Huey, I don't want any part of it.
There was a kid in Coldwater, Mississippi. Nobody knows where Coldwater, Mississippi is unless you got a map. I told him, I said, don't make no tracks in Coldwater, Mississippi next year. That guy belongs to me. I got there that day, there was 12 scouts there.
And if the talent's there at the college level, it may be as good as it's going to get. You may be looking at a product and know that this pitcher, this hitter, is never going to be much better than I'm seeing him right now. But that may still be pretty good.
Major college coaches will try to tell you that college baseball is equivalent to AA baseball. And if you stop and look at it realistically, that college team may get 2, 3, say they get 5 players drafted off of their team. Those players, 90% of those guys go to A-ball. And so if the college team was equivalent to AA, the whole team should be drafted and at least go straight to AA.
The talent pool for us is smaller now because with expansion over the last few years, we get less chance of signing the players. So we have to, when we get them, we have to sell them. We have to get them in our organization. It's much more than just lining them up and taking the best guy. We have to sign the guy. There's no point in drafting him if we don't think we can sign him.
There are guys that get out of high school, they are ready to play professional baseball. First of all, they're not going to be good college students, and they're mature enough, they're physically and mentally mature enough to go out and play. Not everyone is physically and mentally mature enough to go out and play. Those guys probably need to go to a 4-year college or a junior college and maybe prolong that dream for just a couple of years until they get physically and mentally ready to play.
If you break him down, a high school boy, you break him down and he's a bona fide prospect, you have to tell him to go baseball. You just have to say, well, if you don't, the last year you play in professional baseball, when you finally go to college, you're going to lose 3 years of baseball, right? And you're going to lose 3 years at your high salary. Your last 3 years you play baseball is a high salary. You could lose a lot of money because you're going to spend 3 years out of high school in college. And then you're going to go, but you kind of hate to, you say to yourself, well, if I tell the father and the boy and the mother that, and then the kid don't pan out, they're going to feel bad towards me, but there's not a thing I can do about that.
Do you know if this kid is signed to go to any college? You don't know? Haven't heard? Maybe ask his dad if his dad's down there and get a feel for signability.
There's no such thing as an easy sign. I don't care what you do, something is going to flare up. Something is going to ignite. What I used to try to do, I used to try to find out or figure out who's going to be the boss. And most of the time, it's the mother. Most of the time, it's the mother. She might sit there, many a time, I've seen the mother sit there all evening long, 3 or 4 or 5 hours, not say one word. And when it come right down to the cat ate the mouse or whatever, she finally will speak up. But I've had her figured out for about 2 or 3 hours. I'd say to myself, she's the one that's going to make this decision for the evening's over with.
You know, you go to a particular program, let's say, that's well noted for producing good baseball players. Well, that's a deterrent to objectivity right away, because maybe you're expecting there to be somebody there and you, in a sense, invent a prospect. By the same token, you might go into an area where there's been a history of very few prospects. So you might be thinking in the back of your mind, well, I don't know how this guy could be a prospect. Or you might be influenced by other scouts. Your friend might say, boy, this guy can really play. And before that, you were thinking, this guy can't play. A scout has to keep his emotions totally under control. And that's why all scouts look calm and collected at the ball game. They may not be that way in their personal lives, but you know, you have to collect yourself, and you have to be able to put that argument with your wife out of the picture when you go to the ball game, because you might take it out on the prospect, and the guy does something maybe that irritates you a little bit. Well, rather than being objective where that wouldn't bother you normally, you know, you might say, well, this guy can't play. Well, you know, you've got to rise above that.
I've thought about it a few times where I absolutely see a coach mistreat ball players so bad, especially pitchers. Pitch him today 7 innings, relieve with him tomorrow, start him the next day, and just know they're going to ruin the pitcher. They're going to ruin him, actually, and if they do. And you say to yourself, I ought to go talk to that so-and-so. But then you say, well, no, that's not, I'm treading deep water once I go in there and challenge him, right?
But there are some high school coaches, and it seems like the lower level it is, the worse it is, but they yell at and degrade these high school players under the guise of building character. If anybody confronts them about it, they'll say, oh, I'm making him a better person. They're destroying some of these kids' self-images, and it really takes its toll on me to have to watch that and really not be able to say anything. You know, there's a certain amount of luck involved in scouting. I don't think anybody would deny that. Yet there are certain scouts that have had tremendous success. Tony Lucadella of the Phillies, in his scouting career, signed 51 players that got to the major leagues. And that's just phenomenal when you consider that the average scout might get one player to the big leagues every, say, 5 to 8 years. One of the secrets that he told me was that he studied a player's face. You can see maybe things like determination, self-confidence, poise. Does he have focus as to where he's going, not just in this ball game, but in life?
The sad case is Tony Lucadella, who I think was a brilliant scout. I think one of the greatest scouts in the history of the game, who scouted for the Philadelphia Phillies for many years, was responsible for signing Mike Schmidt, Ferguson Jenkins, probably 50 other ball players, and who in his later years was not taken that seriously by his ball club. I think he felt alienated and lonely, and he kind of made up stories that were fantastic stories and fun to hear, but he would tell them to you as if he expected you to believe them. For example, of a championship game he witnessed where, with 2 out in the 9th inning and the bases loaded and the game on the line, the hitter hits a pop fly into short center field that may or may not fall in, but suddenly lightning strikes, the ball breaks in two, one half is caught by the center fielder and the other half falls in for a hit. And I realized as I was listening to the story that this is out of the Twilight Zone. This is not a real story, and yet it's being told by somebody who seems to want you to believe it. And I think this guy's been on the road too long, or been neglected, I would say, by his scouting supervisors too long.
He got mistreated so bad, and I have never forgiven the people that mistreated him in Philadelphia. I wouldn't piss in their ass if their guts was afire over it. They took all of his good part-time men away from him. They're going to show him they were boss and all that bullshit. They fired him. He didn't even know it. And he put them back to work out of his own pocket. They weren't making much, a couple $1,000 apiece. I mean, it cost him $8,000 or $10,000. But he had put those people up and taught them, and he really had great success. And he would call me and he would cry, absolutely cry. He said, what can I do, Uncle Hugh?
I got to the park and Tony was there, and we talked a little bit, and then had gotten to be pretty close friends. He had helped me a lot in scouting, and I started watching batting practice, and so when I thought it was time to go, I just happened to walk by Tony. I said, Tony, I'm taking off, see ya. And he said, Gerry, come here. And I walked over to him, and he looked at me, and Tony was sort of most people would describe as a crusty, old, extremely competitive, individualistic scout. And he looked me in the eye and he goes, I love you. And it really took me back. And I knew that Tony had been struggling. This was right at the end of his career with some with some things, and I just looked him in the eye back. I said, well, I love you too, Tony. But yet I turned and walked away and went to the ball game. And 2 weeks later, Tony killed himself. I never saw him again.
We used to make $5,000 or $6,000 a year, and that wasn't enough money. The mediocre scout, they'd make $3,600.
But I've never understood why teams who want to economize start doing it with scouting in the farm system.
I think it's terrible the kind of money they pay baseball scouts. I've been the highest paid scout up to the last 2 years that has ever been in baseball. Do you know that? I'm well over the $100,000 mark. I went over that a long time ago. Most scouts, they work for $30,000 a year, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000. There's a few, but...
A journeyman ball player, somebody who's maybe never hit over 280 in his life and maybe will be good for 65 RBIs, can get $2 million as a DH. So when you think of what that money could do if you put it down a different road, you find one or two ball players or come up with one or two more players out of your own system. You've got them presumably for 6 years before they become free agents. It's clearly the best money in baseball.
I've gotten a few guys into this business that I sort of look back and regret because they're divorced now, and you know, it's a very, very tough occupation not just on a husband and a wife, but on a family, on the children as well.
I went through, and this is a tough deal here, I went through about 5 wives, and I can understand why. You know, hell, I was gone all the time.
Now, he could have given it up, but he's a baseball man. He wasn't going to do that.
Baseball is a part of me. It's in me. It's not going to leave. And there's no amount of evil in the world that's going to take that out.
Scouting is the best job in the world. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. You own an expense account. You go where you want to go, come back when you get ready, and stay as long as you want to.
95% of the time you're making up your own schedule, and they just expect you to beat the competition, so you do it in your own style, and you do it in your own way, and you can work as hard as you want to work.
Well, a scout like a Gerry Craft that's not afraid to go against the grain a little bit, there's still a lot of room for guys going out and finding that player that nobody else sees because they're their own man, and they're going to they're going to listen to the dictates of their heart and their minds instead of what somebody else says.
I think 100 years from now, there'll be guys sitting behind the fence, you know, the backstop, looking through the chicken wire. May not even be a cyclone fence. They'll be saying horse shit. They'll probably be chewing tobacco, and they'll be saying this kid's got the good face. You know, it'll be mechanized, it'll be controlled, it'll be bureaucratized, but it'll still be baseball, and there'll still be a lot of room for heart and spirit and love in it.
Come inside with the fastball, bud. Yes. Nathan, I'm not going to let you go home. Since you even thought of coming, we've won every single game. And you're not leaving.
Do I get a World Series share?